Hello, this is Nikki Toyama-Szeto, Executive Director of Christians for Social Action, and your host for today's episode of 20-Minute Takes. Today we talk with Pastor Bill White. He's a pastor of a church in Long Beach, California. He joins us today to give us some of the background of that story as he, as an evangelical pastor, wrestled with his gay son's coming out and what that means for him as a pastor, but also the larger journey of questions and exploration that the church went on together. Join us for this episode of 20-Minute Takes. Bill, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of 20-Minute Takes.
So glad to be here.
Was there something that was sort of an incident that caused your church to go down a journey of deeper grappling with this question?
It was a confluence of a few things, but one stood out. So our denomination was sort of tearing itself apart at the seams about this, and leadership of the denomination said we should be having these conversations. Secondly, we're in Long Beach, California, which is super gay.
Is that right?
It's I think the fourth or fifth most gay city in America.
Okay.
And our neighborhood, it's a very neighborhood-centric church. I think I have something like 20 gay neighbors. I'm on a corner, so between my block north and south, just normal small city blocks, I have like 20 gay neighbors. Uh-huh. So those things were obviously really important. And then in 2015, my son came out.
Okay.
And we realized we're definitely going to have to talk about this.
And can you tell us a little bit about before your son came out, before you started on a journey asking the questions of how does your Christian faith inform how you show up to the gay community? Can you describe who you were then? And then can you talk to us a little bit about the journey that you had with your son?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I was a good evangelical. You know, I really.
And what does
was.
that mean? What is a good evangelical?
I mean, again, I'm from like the standard white guy, sort of megachurch model, Saddleback, Willow Creek. You know, it's all about leadership and evangelism, and you know, we might pass the plate twice during a service because you got to raise money. These sorts of things. I was an outreach pastor. I counted and I made sure our numbers were bigger this week than last week. I mean, it was very sort of some of the stereotypical aspects of evangelical culture, which included a conservative theology around LGBT people. Uh-huh. And I was tortured inside because my brother came out in 1990.
Okay.
And I was just tortured because I'd seen how Christians treated him so poorly. Uh-huh. And so I was just angsty. I was angsty. And I'd always prayed that my son would not be gay because I worried. And I think I knew.
So even from the very beginning, you always were praying, particularly.
I prayed for that. I prayed specifically about that. Yeah. And we named him we named our son after my gay brother.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So there's a certain irony there.
And I think I understood that you had a relationship with your son even before he was born.
Oh,
is
yeah.
That right? And what did that look like?
I mean, I write a lot of letters. Uh-huh. I write a lot of journals. I had a lot of journal entries for my son before he was even born. I wrote multiple letters to my son's wife before he was born.
Before he was born.
I mean, a little awkward now. He's like, "Wow, Dad, nice job there. Kind of missed the mark a little bit, Dad." Yeah, I know, son. Sorry about that. But he and I have always been close, and so I actually knew. In 2013, he came out to himself in 2015. Uh-huh. So I knew about 18 months before he did that he was gay. And so that was actually God's gift to me because I got to go on my own journey and be like, okay, look, you can't hide anymore. You need to do the work. And it was hard for me. I mean, they were screaming and crying and yelling at God. And I read everything and prayed and blamed myself and blamed everybody. All the stuff that you do when life doesn't turn out the way you want, and you're confronted, honestly, with an entire people group that you've excluded. And now you realize this is me. These are my people.
Oh.
And it wrecked me. And it was one of the greatest gifts God's ever given me, to have a gay son.
You talk about sort of the havoc that, and the way that it sort of turned upside down. Mm-hmm. I heard you say kind of the crying and some of the grief. But then you also say, but it ended up being one of the greatest gifts. Oh. What happened, what happened to make two things that seem really opposite? How did that shift come?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a double shift. So it's the personal shift and the more communal shift. The personal shift is, I don't honestly. I got real with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, Jesus, because I'd done the pray the gay away thing with a bunch of folks over the years, and no one had ever changed. And I was and so many of my friends who were queer had given up their faith. And Jesus is the best thing in my life. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I am not letting my son miss out on the best thing in my life. Mm-hmm. And so I just felt like I went toe to toe with Jesus. And I'm like, look, I know you're bigger than me. I know you created the universe, and I don't give a damn. Mm-hmm. We're going to argue and we're going to fight this out. Mm-hmm. And I am not holding back. You are not going to, stop loving my son. Mm-hmm. And I realized like, hey, I probably shouldn't be talking to you like this. There were a few F-bombs in there too. But it's like
Jesus was able to handle it. Is that
apparently he was. Apparently, who knew? And I think for me that was it. It was like I was so scared that if I loved my son, I would lose Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so I just had to tell Jesus that. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, I actually believe you've called me to love. And so I'm going to love my son, even though a lot of my religious culture tells me not to. Mm-hmm. And if I'm wrong, send me to hell. Mm-hmm. If you send me to hell for loving well, then okay. Mm-hmm. Then you're not the kind of God I want to follow anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, a lot of that that internal stuff, then what happens is it starts working out externally and realizing, oh my gosh, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I actually get to follow Jesus. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was scared to death of thinking about racial equity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, I gave lip service to it and gave the occasional sermon, but scared to death because it's so big. And what am I going to do? Like how? And there's so much guilt and shame and all the white fragility stuff. Like I was terrified, but now I'm like, all right, let's go.
Wow.
Like Jesus, if you're big enough, like you can handle my absolute inability to think about these things.
Yes.
My absolute limited. I mean, I am so limited. I'm so privileged, all these things. Yeah. And like, send me a trans person. Let's go. Like if you can call me to love my son and still love me and I can still love you, like, oh my God, I could love anyone or at least try.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So it sounds like just hanging with Jesus, going through that journey, there was sort of this, if Jesus can be present to me, and if I'm also surviving this with Jesus, like bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on.
There's nothing that I can't.
I know. And I think, and to be honest, there's sort of the internal piece is what do you do with the Bible? Right? I mean, the Bible. And I think I was really scared that I was going to lose the Bible also.
Okay.
I was mostly scared that I was going to lose Jesus. But then I realized, okay, I'm going to get Jesus, but I might lose the Bible. Oh, no, I love the Bible. I read the Bible every day. I've grown up on this and I teach from it. And I think that was really scary too. And that's been a very similar journey I had a pastor in a conservative church email me this week and say to me, like, hey, I want to go on this journey. I'm becoming affirming. My church is full of PhDs. They've read everything and they're not convinced. What book would you recommend? And they mentioned all the books that you would read. And you know what book came to mind? It's the Womanist Midrash. Have you read
No.
by
What do we need to know about this book?
by Wilda Gaffney? Oh my gosh, it is fantastic. Wilda Gaffney is an Old Testament professor. She and womanist theology is feminist theology from a Black perspective, and she goes through every single woman in the Hebrew Scriptures. And as she does so, you realize, like, oh my word, I have never seen any of this. And what she's doing is she's giving the Bible back to people like me who are scared of losing it, not realizing that what we had done is we'd come at it with these lenses that what I was losing was my lens. I wasn't losing the Bible. Yeah. And so Wilda Gaffney, amongst many others, queer theologians and others, like Mujerista theologians, like Ada Maria Isasi Diaz, right? I mean, these folks who are seeing the Scripture with new lenses and loving it, honoring it, and showing me Christ there in ways I've never even seen before. I'm like, oh my word, I'm not going to lose the Bible. I'm going to get it back.
Yeah. That's so interesting because I think even as you're describing it, I've had a similar experience where when you understand the context of the stories and some of the things that are happening in the Bible, you recognize that the Bible is actually commenting on some of the different things we see today. And what I didn't realize is I had scrubbed it of all of its specificity in order to make it universal. But there's sort of a way that God actually shows up in the specific as a first century Jewish man. And it's in the specificity that actually helps us. He's not an amorphous being,
I love that. That is so profound. Yeah. I mean, very much my experience.
And so what did you do with those troublesome passages? Because I think sometimes people feel like, oh, it's troublesome. They're scared of having to I'm going to cut that part out of the Bible. But I don't know. What happened for you with some of those quote unquote troublesome passages?
Yes, there are a few things that happen to me, and they interconnect. Okay, so one is just as a good evangelical, right? And I use that phrase to say, hey, I love the Bible, I love hermeneutics, I'm going to exegete, I'm going to do word studies. There's actually a lot of great stuff out there where you realize, like, like there actually is a different way of looking at Romans 1 and Leviticus 18 and these passages when you unpack the Greek words and look at their context and things like that. And so that was very freeing to do that in the way that I had known and to realize that and along with that is the, again, from my tradition, the good evangelical white academic tradition, like studying theology and studying church history and realizing, people's theology changes, right? And
I see.
So there's the kind of word study stuff, there's the history stuff, and then I think there's some of the stuff around what is inerrancy, how does inerrancy work, and how really does inerrancy support the status quo of those in power, right? So all the theology I read in seminary was from dead white males or a couple of living white males. And for all I know, all of them were straight cisgender. And when you start to read some womanist theology and mujerista theology, and you realize there's different ways to think about this. And there's different ways to come at the Bible where inerrancy is a construct that allows those with power to keep it.
Wow. I mean, so it sounds like this journey with your son ended up really having implications on big like the fundamental question: is the Bible trustworthy? Is it inerrant? That's the inerrancy question. Is this journey with Jesus? Can Jesus love me? Can I love Jesus? How do you think this journey that you had with your son, this deeply personal one that then led you to really kind of wrestle with a lot of assumptions about your faith, how did that affect your church? And how did that affect you as a pastor?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing it did is it almost killed our church. Again,
were you sharing this live as you're wrestling with these things?
Yes.
Or
yeah.
Oh, wow.
So we pulled together a study team, and the study team was fantastic. We had 3 true conservatives, 3 true progressives, and a bunch of folks in the middle. And we studied for 18 months. I mean, we did word studies. We brought in experts who were conservative and experts who were progressive, and read the commentaries, everything. Right, for 18 months. I love
that you did that in community.
It was great.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And we invited the congregation with some town hall meetings along the way.
Yes.
Part of what happened at that time, though, is my co-pastor had left. And so I was left leading as a solo pastor, and I am not gifted in that area. I'm just not. And so the confluence of those two things, our LGBT study team and me being solo pastor, not good at it, I like to say that a bad pastor can grow their church in half, but you have to be a really terrible pastor to grow it in a third. And I achieved that. So we were worshiping at like 165 and dropped down to about 55 people.
Wow. Yeah.
But what happened is that the people who stayed, and we had both conservative and progressive people who stayed, because the study team came out unanimous. No one changed their theology in that process. They said, hey, I'm still progressive or I'm still conservative, but I recognize that people see there's a diversity of theology around this, and it's not a litmus test for orthodoxy. And so the study team stayed, and people in the church stayed who wanted to be a part of that. And what that meant is that as a church, we could enter into hard conversations.
Oh, wow.
So, for example, we could have a conversation about abortion that you can't typically have openly, a conversation.
Yes.
Right? As opposed to like, this is what the Bible says, or this is God's perspective.
Yeah.
So we could do that. And we could talk about, like, one Sunday, we had a local friend of ours who does training around racial justice. So one Sunday, people came in and the chairs were all set up in small groups. And she led us in dialogue around difference, around our ethnic journeys. And so it wasn't a typical Sunday service. It was actually an exploration of our racial identities and how those come in conflict with each other. So we could do things like that because we built all this muscle around having really hard conversations.
Oh, that's amazing. What made it, so here in the early part of this process, this discernment process, and, you said your church is starting to trend towards a third. What made you decide to keep going with it and not sort of say, okay, enough, like people aren't going to church because of this. Like we just need to stop this. It's divisive. What made you all decide to keep going?
Great question. Let me think about that. I mean, one, I was a solo pastor at that point, and so they were kind of stuck with me, and I'm stuck with my family, right? My family's
so this mirrored a process you had to go through because you're in relationship with your son. Yeah.
So I think, personally, we had the advantage of being a church plant, so we didn't have a building, we didn't have a mortgage. We were very streamlined in our budget. My wife's got a good job; she carries our insurance, those sorts of things. And so in some ways, we were set up well to shrink and not perish. And then, I remember I had to take an emergency sabbatical in this process because I was just becoming undone. I was not leading well. It wasn't even about the LGBT stuff. I did not treat my staff well. I didn't treat myself well. And I was just sort of falling apart. So I took an emergency sabbatical in the summer of 2017, which was a real gift. Some mentors came around and said, I needed to do that. And on that sabbatical, I I said to Jesus, I said, okay, look, should I just give up pastoring because I've made a mess of this?
Mm-hmm.
The church had been shrinking consistently and I just wasn't leading well.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one day when I was just stuck. I was just stuck. And for whatever reason, I just felt the leaning to go out in my backyard. I went out in my backyard and I just took some chairs that I had in the house and I set up some chairs in my backyard. And I realized, we can get 25 chairs in the backyard. So if we lose the place we're renting and we don't have a worship team, what I really want is I want to go on this journey towards Jesus with other people who are going to wrestle with the hard things and actually try to see the kingdom of God come.
Wow.
And I'm okay with that, whether I get paid or not. I'm okay. And I think that moment was the kind of, one of those moments where you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. It distilled it down. It sounds like this is the nature of the people. Yeah. It's not the numbers anymore.
Yeah. No.
But no, I love that. I do think that there are a lot of folks who maybe are hearing your story and maybe the pressure points might be different, but they are either in a church that is navigating something pretty tricky. Maybe their church is wrestling with their posture towards LGBTQ Christians and how to be either hospitable or, whatever some of that might, asking what does Christian faithfulness look like? What advice would you give to folks who are on the front end of some of these hard conversations?
Yeah. So my co-pastor and I now, we just have so many of these conversations, right? So we've started a small nonprofit coaching group called Small Church, Big Table, where we have these conversations all the time, right? So I think part of what I would say is the conversation's not going away. You can't make it go away. So therefore you need to have it. But there are ways to have it better and there are ways to have it worse. So choose better. And so there's a process where you have to look inwardly and you have to do some of your own work as a leader. What does it look like to lead through change? And what does my congregation look like? Yesterday, or no, it's the day before, on a call with half a dozen pastors, right? And we're working through this very conversation, right? It's a coaching call, and we're in the book of Acts, and we're looking at the first council and how they managed Gentile inclusion. Not saying it's an exact parallel, but we're thinking about this, and they come out with this letter that says, okay, don't eat food sacrificed to idols. Well, what's super interesting is in Mark 7, Jesus says all food is clean. Now in Acts 15, the council says some food is not clean. Then Paul goes in 1 Corinthians 10 through 12 and Romans 14, 15 and says all food's clean. And then Jesus comes back in the book of Revelation, chapter 3, and says some food is not clean. Don't eat food sacrificed to idols. And so we're having this conversation, we're looking at these passages, and one of the pastors in a conservative church says, context matters. So your church context is going to matter how you have this conversation. So in a Pan-Asian church that's coming out of a more sort of sophisticated intellectual background, it's going to look this way. I'm talking with an African-American pastor who himself is affirming in a very non-affirming urban setting. His church.
It's going to look different there. Yeah.
It looks different there. I'm working with a Korean-American pastor, grew up in Korea, is in a completely affirming church, but she's not sure she's affirming. And so, again, all the conversation, you're going to have them. Yeah. And there are better ways and worse ways. So, learn the better ways.
Bill, this is so fascinating. And I think I appreciate kind of the honesty of both how difficult, but also some of the gift that has come through the process. Last question. What is something that you have learned about Jesus as you've journeyed through this process?
He's just so much better than I thought he was.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, just before, when my son was coming out, I was terrified that Jesus would leave me, that I wasn't good enough, that Jesus couldn't love people who were different, divergent in whatever way.
Mm-hmm.
That and then along the way, other things get opened up about like racial justice and equity, thinking about capitalism and what is capitalism and poverty and like like all these things that I grew up with in my life. And I was terrified that Jesus didn't have anything to say,
Mm-hmm.
but he does.
Hmm.
And he loves so well. My mind is just blown by how good Jesus is, how strong Jesus is, how true Jesus is in all these settings. So it's just been. I used to think that, oh yeah, I kind of got Jesus down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm like, I don't know 1% of who. I mean, I don't know it 10. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Keeps getting better.
Well, Bill White, thank you so much for sharing both the story of your church, but also your personal journey here with us on 20 Minute Takes.
Thank you. It's great to be with you guys.
"20 Minute Takes" is a production of Christians for Social Action. Our music was created by Andre Henry, and this episode was mixed and engineered by Willoza Media. If you like this episode, spread the word by subscribing, reviewing, or sharing. I'm your host, Nikki Toyama-Szeto. If you want to find out more about our work, visit the website at christiansforsocialaction.org.